I love Doc Brown from the 1980s classic sci-fi movies Back to the Future. And I like how he tells Marty McFly, "We're going back to the future." That's where we're going. Genesis chapter 49. Jacob is taking us to the future. He is speaking words from God. This is the first time in the Bible where a human being is consciously giving a prophetic word about other human beings, namely his own descendants. And I got to tell you a personal story about Genesis 49. I always interpreted it without studying it carefully enough as the blessings that Jacob left his sons as he was getting ready to leave this earth and leave this life. And I chose it for my text for my first confirmation class, that of me leaving my blessings to the kids. But when I took a closer look at the passage, I was like, holy cow, I made a mistake. These are not blessings. A lot of these are curses. A lot of these are judgments. A lot of these are not good. This is your sin finding you out, that kind of thing. And I'm like, man, I'm not going to pick that for a confirmation class again. Well, let's pick up the action. Genesis chapter 49. Jacob, it's titled Jacob Blesses His Sons. I don't know, it depends on what you mean by the word bless. We're going to find that out. Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come." And perhaps the 12 sons of Israel gather around him with excitement and anticipation of what will go down, just as Jacob went before his father Isaac and deceitfully took his blessing, even though God had already decided in Genesis 25 he was going to be blessed. They're all excited, and maybe some of them are coming with fear, like, I know I have not lived up to be the person that Dad would want me to be. What's this going to be like? Well, verse 2, "Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel." And then he speaks to the firstborn. Verse 3, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. You were the man. You were the first kid that I had in the prime of my life with Leah, and I'll never forget it. You were excellent in honor. You had it all." Man, I bet you Reuben wish he would have just stopped right there. Verse 4, "Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up on your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it." Remember, Rachel had died in Genesis 35, and right around that time, Reuben had gone up onto his father's couch and had relations with one of Jacob's concubines. That's something you only do once the father has passed away, so Reuben was acting like his father was already dead or about to die. It was a horrible thing. It was like the prodigal son asking for his inheritance while the father was still living in Luke 15. This is even more disrespectful. And Jacob said, "You will no longer excel, for you went up on your father's bed onto my couch and defiled it." Now, this is not just coming from Jacob. This is coming from Jacob's God. This is God speaking through Jacob. And true, Reuben didn't excel after that. After the wilderness wanderings, his tribe got smaller and smaller, and he ended up settling for land just east of the Jordan River, and his tribe didn't excel. There were no kings that came from Reuben. There were no powerful leaders that came from that tribe. They didn't excel anymore. You can be sure your sin will find you out. And even if you repented of your sin, there's still accountability. In fact, the first letters of Reuben's name in Hebrew, Ru, means he sees. God sees everything, man. Let's see, verse 5. He moves on to Simeon and Levi, who are probably thinking, oh man, I was looking forward to this. I don't know if I'm looking forward to this now after what Dad said to Reuben. Oh boy. It's going to be like standing before the judgment seat of Christ and finding out that, yeah, you're in the kingdom, but because you had unrepentant sin in your life that you wouldn't confess to the Lord, you're going to miss out on certain rewards. You're not going to be judged for your sin because Christ took your judgment on the cross, but you might miss out on certain benefits and blessings and rewards on account of the fact that you willfully continued in unrepentant sin as a believer. You were weak and sick. And Simeon and Levi are probably feeling that. Oh man, what's going to happen? Verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. You know what he's referring to. He's referring to Genesis 34, when to take revenge on Dinah being raped, Simeon and Levi strapped on their swords and they put the entire town to the sword. Of course, they killed Shechem, the one who raped Dinah and married her. They killed Hamor, Shechem's father, but they killed everybody. Verse 6, let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Verse 7, cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. You know, there is such a thing as godly anger. When Jesus went into the temple and he drove out the money changers, and in John 2 he said, how dare you turn my Father's house into a market. Later on, when he cleansed the temple in the synoptic gospels in Matthew 21, he said, you have turned the house of God into a den of robbers. It's supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations, but instead you've made it a home for thieves to rob. And cursed be their anger, I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Simeon was the third largest tribe when they left Egypt, and by the time they got into the Promised Land, they were one of the smallest tribes. And if you read into the book of Joshua, you find out that they only ended up getting a little bit of land connected to the land of Judah, which, no pun intended, got the lion's share of the land. We'll get to that. Levi was scattered throughout Israel, but David Guzik, in his commentary on the Enduring Word Commentary, I think he's right that in Levi's case it turned out to be a blessing. They didn't get land of their own. That may have been, I don't know if that was a punishment or not, but it says in Joshua 13 that the Lord was their inheritance, and God provided for them, and they would live off the tithes of Israel and the offerings and be completely dependent on God. And they had 6 cities of refuge, 3 west of the Jordan River and 3 east of the Jordan River, that people could go to for refuge when accused of a capital crime. So for Simeon, it was a curse that he got scattered, but Levi, in a way, was a blessing because there were priests. He was the priestly line, and there were priests scattered throughout Israel. Verse 8. Judah is next, and there is a Talmudic tradition that Judah was literally quaking in his shoes, in his sandals, when he went to Jacob, because he overheard the quote-unquote blessings that Reuben and Simeon and Levi got. So he figured, well, man, I'm really going to get it, because I did not live an exemplary life. I was the one who suggested that Joseph be sold for 20 pieces of silver in Genesis 37. 2 of my sons were put to death by the Lord in Genesis 38. I slept with my daughter-in-law without knowing it and had a kid through her, Genesis 38. You know, he's probably thinking, man, Jacob, Dad's going to lay into me big time. But that's not the whole story. Judah told his father, if anything happens to Benjamin, I will bear the blame before you all my life. And when Joseph was going to keep Benjamin for a slave, of course not knowing it was Joseph, Judah said, take me instead. I will substitute my life for Benjamin. And of course, that's what the Messiah is going to do. He's going to substitute his life for the Benjamins of this world. He's going to substitute his life on the cross for us fallen sinners. Jacob sees that quality in Judah, the redemption of his life. Verse 8, Judah means he will praise, or he will give praise. So Jacob makes a play on words. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. And, and that was true throughout Judah's time. They had all those kings of Judah. And, of course, kings, David, king of Israel and Judah, Solomon, king of Israel and Judah, later on, King Hezekiah. The Lord gave them victory wherever they went. King Asa, for most of his reign, was a good king. King Azariah, most of his reign, was a good king. King Josiah, a super godly king from Judah. So this prophecy comes true in their lives. Verse 9, you are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? Now we come to the really pointed prophecy of verse 10. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nation shall be his. Well, man, that sounds really confusing, doesn't it? Basically, it's saying that the right for rulership and leadership will not leave Judah until the ultimate leader comes. And here it's translated, until he to whom it belongs shall come. But ki lavo shilo in Hebrew, I think a better translation, most translations say until Shiloh comes. And Shiloh has become a name for the Messiah, and it could mean peaceful or full of peace. And what does Ephesians chapter 2 verse 14 say about Jesus? He himself is our peace, who has made the two one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. What did Jesus say in John 14:27? Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. So this is a prophecy that Judah will be the tribe from whom kings will reign right up until the time Shiloh comes, until the Messiah comes, the one who will give his life for substitute himself for the Benjamins, for the sinners of this world. Verse 11, he will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. Remember, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, Zechariah 9:9, Matthew 21, Mark 11. Let's see, he will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. He's going to be full of health and life and vitality and spirituality and ready to reign. Verse 13, Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon. And, of course, they were going to get logs and timber from Tyre and Sidon and bring it down on ships and land in Zebulun and in other port cities. Although I think most of the logs for the temple, they probably landed a little further south, but Zebulun was a port city. Verse 14, Issachar is a raw-boned donkey lying down among the sheep pens. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. He's going to have beautiful territory, and he's going to have lots of people, but they're not going to aspire to greatness. They're going to be content with what they have, probably a little too docile, a little too content, and they will be taken advantage of and brought into forced labor by future kings. Verse 16, Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Boy, I bet you Dan wishes it would stop there, because listen to what comes next. Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backwards. And if you read in the Bible about the tribe of Dan, they were nasty. Yeah, Micah was a priest in the Bethlehem area, I think it was. I got to look it up. Judges 17. And then the tribe of Dan came through, and they took Micah's idols, and they ended up offering Micah a deal he couldn't refuse, and he ended up being a priest for the whole tribe of Dan. And the owner came after Dan and said, "Give me back my idols, give me back my priest." And they said to him, "Go back home." And then the tribe of Dan also introduced idolatry into Israel, as you read in Judges chapter 18. And in fact, the tribe of Dan is not even mentioned as one of the tribes of Israel in Revelation chapter 7. And there's a rebuke of idolatry in Revelation chapter 9, verse 20. And so a lot of people think Dan was deliberately left out of the list because of his propensity toward introducing Israel to idolatry. And also Dan's name means justice or judgment, and God himself is the one who judges in the book of Revelation. And there were some people who believed that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan. Well, we know that's not true. Daniel 9:26. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The people were the Romans, so the ruler who will come will be a Roman. So the Antichrist will probably be an Eastern European, not from the tribe of Dan, but that's a side point. Verse 18, Jacob breathes out a prayer. I look for your deliverance, Lord. Jacob is saying all of these hard things and breaking the hearts of his children. And Jacob, in his weakness, needs to say, God, I need deliverance. God, I need salvation. The word for deliverance is Yehoshua, and a lot of people think Jacob was calling on Jesus without even fully knowing it. Verse 19, Gad, the tribe of Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. They will defend themselves. There'll be a tribe known to do that. Verse 20, the tribe of Asher, that was beautiful land that produced great food and luxuries. Listen to this. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. And Asher means happy. So that's going to be happy land because it's going to be so productive and so bountiful. Verse 21, Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. The Hebrew text could mean brings beautiful words, and we know that Jesus spoke beautiful words in the land of Naphtali, according to Matthew chapter 4, and I like that interpretation very much, but I'm afraid the Hebrew probably leans away from words and toward beautiful fawns. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns, and the reason why it's set free is because they had the one who sets people free speaking God's word in their land. That's where I would go with that. Verse 22 to 26, the blessings on Joseph. He is a fruitful vine. He had two kids, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Manasseh means he forgets, and Ephraim he is fruitful. And Jacob is saying Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. So Jacob is referring to his sons as archers filled with hostility. I mean, Jacob nailed it. He knew at the end what his sons did to Joseph. Getting a phone call in the middle of my Bible lesson. Hi, I'm doing Bible study live on Facebook. Can I call you later? Thank you so much. Bye-bye. I forgot to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. One thing about putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, don't forget to turn the phone back on. That's the other problem with that. All right. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob. Jacob is referring to God as the mighty one of Jacob. He's not the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac only anymore. He's now my God. He's my mighty one. And that's really the goal of faith, is for the Lord to be your God, for you to surrender your life to God, for you to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and be saved. Because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel. Look at all this great theology. God is the mighty one of Jacob. He is the shepherd and the rock of Israel. Verse 25, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below. Verse 26, your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. And then the last son, verse 27, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, in the evening he divides the plunder. And yeah, Benjamin is ravenous. You go into the book of Judges, and the men of Benjamin raped that man's concubine in Judges chapter 18 and 19, and ended up being civil war. And they vigorously held their own in a civil war with all the rest of Israel over this raping in Judges 20 and in Judges 21. The third day they were finally beaten, but man, they were ravenous. And then of course King Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was a ravenous king and filled with rage and jealousy. And so was the apostle Paul, Acts chapter 8, full of rage and spirited tribalism, that he was going to get rid of those Christians for the glory of Yahweh. So until he got saved, and then he became ravenous for the Lord. So very interesting, these statements that Jacob is making about his sons. Verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. Tongue in cheek, bless them, giving each the blessing appropriate to them. And then he said, I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave of the field of Ephron the Hittite. And then he says, that's where Abraham and Sarah were buried. That's where Isaac and Rebekah were buried. And that's where I buried Leah. And then when he had finished giving these instructions, he drew his feet into the bed and he breathed his last. The great patriarch of the people, Jacob, has gone into eternity. We'll be back tomorrow for Genesis chapter 50. Jesus loves you. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. Have a great day. Bye-bye.